We've done part 1. I want to love Linux, it doesn't love me back post 1, built for control, but not for people. We've done part 2. The audio stack is a crime scene. And now it is time for part 3. Speakup, Brltty TTY, and the forgotten infrastructure of console access. Today we are stepping into the part of Linux that supposedly just works. And for people that can see, it generally does. The console, the TTY, the raw text-only interface you drop into when X dies, the GUI fails, or you're installing a system from scratch. The GUI fails, assuming that it fails cleanly and doesn't lock up and you're in a situation where nothing is happening. That's happened to me. I did know I could swap to a different TTY, but it's not guaranteed you're going to drop into it. Sighted users can rely on it without thinking, but if you're blind, that safety net comes with holes, duct tape, and a list of arcane incantations. You might think it works amazingly because it's all text, so of course screen readers are going to work. Yes, assuming the screen readers are working, and various other things don't cause problems, which is the whole reason that this post actually exists. This is about braille, speech, and the illusion of accessibility in text mode. Not your GNOME terminal, not console, but the real TTY. Control-Alt-F2, system recovery shells, live install environments, the kind of places where graphical desktops are gone and the console is your last best hope. Linux claims to support blind users here, it even ships the tools. But using them, getting speech or braille output when you need it most, that's a punishing mess of driver quirks, missing defaults, audio stack failures, and layers of modern regression hidden under the surface. Because not only does the desktop space have accessibility regressions, it exists in that side as well. It's just not been a space that people have worked on as much as they really need to. As I've said before, there has been a more modern push to improve things, but a push gets the ball rolling. It takes a bit of time to, get that speed up. Now, before we get into the post, very important tangent about Braille. All of you have probably heard of Braille and seen Braille at some point in your life, but this right here, when the page loads, come on humanware, this website's horrendous is what this is. This right here is a Braille display. These are awful website. These are some of the more cheaper ones. They get very, very expensive. Basically, it'll take text on the screen and then convert it to physical braille that you can read with little white dots on the device and has various buttons, either a full keyboard or macro buttons, various other things to interact with the system. So it's a display, but it's more like a keyboard. It's like got keyboardy elements to it as well, if that makes sense. And later on the post, there will be talk of Braille TTY, the way that you actually make use of Braille on Linux. First up though, is Speakup, the kernel space screen reader that ties into the virtual console. It's been around forever, it works, or at least can work, if everything is aligned and you make the right sacrifices to the right deprecated mailing lists. Now, some distros do things well. In the case of Arch Linux, it does include Speakup in the installed ISO, and it even speaks provided you're using a single sane sound card, not dealing with HDMI audio devices masquerading as real outputs, not booting on hardware with weird port enumerations, and able to press the down arrow and enter to start the talking installer prompt. That's a lot of caveats for what should be basic functionality, but I'll give Arch credit. It tries, and it's the only distro that lets me manually bash something together that mostly works. Not by default, not out of the box, but it's not hostile to the user. Now, Debian also does things well. Boot the installer, press S, and Speakup comes up. But here's where Debian stands alone. If you've got multiple sound cards, which most people probably don't, but if you do, including those HDMI audio traps that pretend to be speakers, but don't actually output anything, Debian asks you which one you want, and then it saves that choice. That's not just a quality of life feature, that's a life-saving one. Now, you do need to know that this is a thing you can do, and obviously if you can't see the screen, you're not able to, press the button unless you go read the documentation, and it is documented there. But honestly, it probably would make a lot more sense to just start with speaking enabled, and then if someone doesn't want it, then you disable it. Kind of like how in KDE Plasma, when you move your cursor around a bunch, it automatically makes the cursor increase in size, and if you don't want that, that has to be disabled. That is an accessibility feature, and having that enabled by default is a good thing. Debian treats the installer like it matters. It's not the prettiest thing out there, it's not following modern design trends, but it works, because for a blind user, it does matter. It's not a graphical toy that you'll only run once. It's the first time the OS proves it knows you exist, and Debian actually shows up. After installation, it still enables Speakup via a systemd service, and that's more than most. But things are not perfect, and it's not entirely the fault of Debian here. The moment you hit a login prompt, you enter a session with user-locked audio. It's the fault of Pulse Audio, Pipewire, and the entire philosophy of session-bound audio daemons that don't care what the kernel is doing. Speakup is running, it's loaded, and it's waiting, but your login session closes the door and walks away with the audio keys, and now you've got a working screen reader screaming silently into the void. Now let's move over to Brltty TTY, the underrated backbone and a source of pain. It's one of the most powerful accessibility tools on Linux, and somehow one of the least discussed. I feel like some of you probably have no idea that Braille displays even exist. This is something which you're only going to have if you specifically need it. I think the reason why it's not really discussed as much is a screen reader is a lot more accessible to work on, a lot more accessible to use, right? Because if you have headphones, earphones, speakers, some sort of device that outputs audio, you can test a screen reader. You can't really test Braille without a Braille display. It supports dozens of Braille displays over USB, Bluetooth, and serial connections. It can drive displays directly from the TTY, integrate with graphical screen readers like Orca, and even act as a bridge between user-space applications and low-level terminal buffers. Braille TTY is the thing that lets blind and deaf-blind users actually use a Linux system, not just when it's booted, but when it's broken, when it's offline, when the network's down, and your last hope is a blinking cursor in a recovery shell. Especially for people who are deaf and blind, Braille TTY is not a luxury. It's the entire user interface. When the speech fails, you can fall back to Braille. When graphics fail, you can fall back to the console. But when Braille fails, and you can't hear output, and you can't see the screen, you're done. There is no fallback, there is no workaround. If Braille TTY doesn't come up clean, or it binds to the wrong port, or it races with you, Dev, and loses, that's it. You're locked out. The only hope you get is putting your hand on your computer and hopefully knowing it's turned on. And like all software, it does fail. On non-English locales, Braille TTY will frequently misrender or drop characters outright. When switching to a graphical session, it often says, "Screen not in text mode," which is accurate, but not exactly useful. Sometimes it just gives up and says, "No screen," no diagnostic, no explanation, just that. Integration with Orca can break silently, no crash, no error message, just a display that doesn't update. Now, our author here has helped debug some other people's systems. This is great if you know somebody who also knows how this device works, if you know somebody who makes use of it. If you don't though, well, you're basically stuck. Braille TTY was running. Sort of. The daemon was active, but the display was frozen. No output, they couldn't read logs, couldn't even tell if the system had booted. They had to get another blind user to SSH in, trace the USB detection, discover that modem manager had eaten the Braille port, and rip it out manually. That's the kind of debugging you can't do if you're the one who needs the accessibility support. And then there's Braille TTY's habit of eating serial and USB ports. Plug in an audio interface or communication device, and it might not appear at all because Braille TTY bound to the port first. The solution, according to some documentation and forum threads, disable Braille TTY, which for someone who can see, for someone who doesn't need it, that's great, and you can do that. But if you need that to be working, turning off your screen reader or your only input-output device, not exactly a solution. Want Braille TTY to work reliably at boot? You need to Add it to your init RMFS with the right module options and dependencies. Write UDEV rules that avoid conflicts, disable modem manager, and maybe even Bluetooth D depending on your device. Ensure your kernel has support for the USB to serial adapter in question loaded early. This isn't optional extra functionality. This is core accessibility infrastructure, and yet Linux treats it like an afterthought, something for edge cases or niche embedded setups. There's no standard distro integration, there's no fallback detection, there's no sanity checking if the configured device fails. Just silence. Linux doesn't support Braille, it ships Brltty TTY, and it prays. It prays that it's gonna work, so we don't have to see posts like this one. Enter Fenrir, the Python-based userland console screen reader that was supposed to be the modern alternative to Speakup. And you know what? It's actually pretty good. It supports scripting. It works with Braille TTY for Braille output. It's easy to configure once installed, and unlike Speakup, it lives entirely in user space, so you don't need to mess with kernel modules. If, and this is a big if, it's included in your distro's repositories, and your kernel upgrades don't suddenly lock up your keyboard when it's active, then Fenrir can deliver a genuinely usable console experience. That's not theoretical, that's from daily use. I didn't actually check this until now. I didn't realize that Fenrir package distribution was this small. Wait, it's not on the AUR. Surely not. This has to be missing the AUR. Okay, no, it's definitely here. Does that site not track the AUR? I thought it did. Anyway, moving on. Here's the problem. You still can't use it to install a distro or boot into a live ISO or rescue a broken system, because it's not included in any installer by default. It needs a working Python environment, audio, shell, and sane locales, and it doesn't auto-start without user setup. So even though it's modern, modular, capable, it's still gated behind a successful installation, which for a blind user is the part that the help is needed on. Fenrir deserves praise for being actively maintained, scriptable, and clean, but like every other tool in the space, it suffers from the absence of upstream integration and predictable defaults. Now, it may not be for you, it may not be for me, but for some people out there, especially those who might be blind or deafblind, it can be the entire system. They may do everything from the TTY. Now, that doesn't mean you have to, but it is an option. You can browse the web with tools like EdBrowse, W3M, or Lynx, handle email through Alpine or Mutt, write and code inside Vim, Nano, or Emacs. Nano coding sounds horrendous. With full screen reading, use Emacs Speak as an entire self-voicing interface, giving you a speech-first experience across text editing, email, file management, and more. This isn't just theoretical, the console was my entire system. Not a backup, not a novelty, a real workspace, fast, reliable, and built for speech. The only problem that I can see here are with tools like browsing the web when you run across websites where the entire thing is rendered with JavaScript, which we love that. That's amazing. Everybody's a fan of that. Whilst the TTY is efficient and free from the visual clutter and accessibility regressions that plague modern desktops, it has its own accessibility regressions, it's just not the additional ones. Eventually, I moved away from the console, not because it failed me, but because I wanted to try something more modern, a full desktop with graphical applications, real-time collaboration tools, and the kind of integrated software that still doesn't exist in TTY land, and honestly probably never will, just because there's not really that many people interested in working in it. I left the console behind reluctantly. It had been my whole world, and it worked. It's not some legacy curiosity, it's a platform that should be first class for blind users, and it nearly was. Now, whilst it did gain stuff from the swap, real-time collaboration through web apps and chat clients, full-featured graphical browsers that could handle modern, JavaScript-heavy websites, a larger ecosystem of mainstream software from productivity suites to communication tools, there were things lost as well. The speed and responsiveness of the TTY, the simplicity and stability of a system where every part was speech-controlled and scriptable, the ability to fix a broken system from the inside without needing to boot external media or beg for sighted assistance. Most of all, though, I lost confidence. On the console, I knew every part of the stack. I could trust it. with a desktop, I'm always watching out for the next GNOME regression, the next broken AT-SPI hook, the next time a browser update silently kills accessibility. Modern Linux desktops offer a broader world, but the console, when it works, offers control, and no blind user should be forced to choose between the two. This isn't just about accessibility, this is about power and independence. Being able to administer servers, work offline, or troubleshoot real-world problems with tools that speak to you on your terms. And it's infuriating that we are still this close to having that experience work out of the box, but only if we fight for it, patch it, and guard it from every system update like it's a fragile shrine. Let's say you're blind. You want to install Linux, and you want both speech and braille at boot. Here's what you have to do. Hope your distro's ISO even boots with audio or braille output. If not, remaster it. Pre-install Brltty TTY with exact driver configs. Pre-enable Speakup. Choose between eSpeakup, which may fail with Pipewire or Pulse Audio, or Fenrir, which won't run unless you're already inside a shell. Fix UDEV, fix systemd ordering, patch init RAMFS, and disable audio user locking. All that just to get a text prompt you can hear or feel. And every part of that pipeline is fragile, undocumented, and increasingly incompatible with modern Linux. There are no presets, no sane defaults, and absolutely no respect for the fact that blind users might need to use the TTY when their desktop breaks. Modern Linux Audio, Pulse Audio, and now Pipewire isn't just sandboxed in the Flatpak sense, it's session locked by design. Only processes running inside the currently active user session are allowed to produce audio. That's fine for desktop apps, because, you know, if your desktop is running, you're going to be running desktop apps. If it's not running, you're not going to run them. But it's a disaster for kernel-level screen readers like Speakup. When you boot, Speakup runs outside your user session. It tries to speak using eSpeakup, which outputs through ULSA, but once Pulse Audio or Pipewire grabs the audio stack, only the current user session's allowed to use it, and Speakup isn't in that session. Result, silence. Now, there is a way to address this. The Fenrir screenreader project provides a script that adds a second Pulse-compatible socket /temp/pulse.sock accessible to root processors, sets Pipewire and WirePlumber configs to keep syncs alive, prevent suspend, and avoid TTY-related disconnects, adds a client or comp for root, telling system processors to use that alternative socket. Run it once as a user and once as root, done. Now you have working audio for both console and graphical environments simultaneously. But this wasn't mentioned in the upstream docs. I learned it from a reader of my first blog post who figured it out and shared it. That's the story of Linux accessibility in a nutshell. Digging through forums, digging through mailing lists, hoping someone at some point in time worked out a solution. Fenrir also includes a similar script for Pulse Audio. It does the same dual socket trick. One config for the user to serve the audio, and one for the root to connect to it. It might work, I haven't tested it deeply, and honestly, Pulse is older, more fragile, and less predictable. Still, someone in the community thought to do this, Upstream didn't. But at the end of the day, none of this should be necessary. There is no standard way to say, this process is accessibility critical, let it speak. No XDG spec, no Pipewire setting, no distro guideline, nothing. So when a blind user logs in, Modern Linux says, welcome human, you may now hear sound, and to speak up the one thing that's been speaking this entire time, shut up, you're not part of the session. Blind users, accessibility, system-wide speech, still treated as noise. The brutal truth is if you're blind, here's what Linux offers you in 2025. Speech output in the console, maybe on some distros, under strict conditions. Braille output at boot if you manually configure it in the init RAMFS, user sessions that break accessibility by default, screen readers that only work after install when it's already too late, and an entire ecosystem that pretends it isn't a problem. Console accessibility is not a solved problem. It's a decaying pile of partial solutions that only work if you never make a mistake, never change hardware, and never let your audio stack change. Now, I have recorded the podcast with the author. It's likely going to be out in, I reckon, not this week, the week after. So I'll let you guys know when it comes out. And he has a lot to say on accessibility, and I do want to do another episode with him at some point. I thought the last one was really fun, and there's a lot more to say here, especially as more posts are being made. There's a future one coming up about bootloaders, so that one will be really enjoyable, and just generally, he was a fun person to talk to, so absolutely check that out when it comes out. But for now, if you enjoyed the video, Let me know your thoughts down below. Are you someone who relies on this tooling? Are you someone who maybe knows someone who relies on the tooling? I would love to know. And if you liked the video, go like the video. If you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe, Pay, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and time to break the audio.